volunteer with the campaign, and we're going to talk in some detail today about costs. But when you assess any venture in life, you discuss costs and benefits. So I thought just to begin, we should talk just a bit about the benefits of going to public power. The city of San Diego, as far as I can tell, has two major crises. One is affordability, and the second is obviously the climate crisis. 360,000 people in the SDGE territory are behind in their electricity bills. 360,000, they're behind an average of $700. SDGE has no plan to deal with affordability, none. They announced a rate increase yesterday, which will only make things worse. They announced rate increases going forward of 45%. So there is no plan from SDGE on dealing with affordability. The Public Power Campaign has a strategy for dealing with affordability. And here's where it starts. It starts by stopping the payment of $1 million a day in profits to SDG&E. As you know, SDG&E made $936 million last year, about half of that from the city of San Diego. The Public Power Campaign starts with stopping the payment of multi-million-dollar salaries to executives. It continues. Public Power will cut rates in San Diego. That's a real affordability. That's truly addressing affordability, cutting rates. That's what we need in this town. So we have a solution to the affordability crisis. San Diego Gas and Electric has none. On the climate, a non-profit public utility in San Diego will emphasize rooftop and solar in town. Rooftop and parking lot solar in town. We'll avoid the huge transmission costs, another huge cost savings, and something that will build resiliency in San Diego. And by building rooftop solar and storage in San Diego, we'll keep money in the city. We'll have an ally in the climate crisis, not an opponent. And we will be able to replace the failed regulation of the PUC with a degree of local control. So we have solutions and benefits for the city of San Diego. As far as we can tell, SDG&E has none. And now I'd like to hand things over to Bill Powers, who will talk about the cost issues that San Diego Gas and Electric raised this week. Bill? Bill, by the way, is chairman of the campaign and a licensed engineer. Thanks.
Thank you, Craig. I want to start with two framework issues, but preface that with this 7-page report that SDG&E's consultant came out with last week is basically SDG&E's disinformation with a consultant's cover sheet on it. It's essentially all SDG&E's material. But two cover points I want to make. One is this is a standard operating procedure for an investor-owned utility that's trying to defeat municipalization. SDG&E is a member of a national lobbying organization. It's called Edison Electric Institute. Edison Electric Institute has prepared for its members a handbook, New Public Power Takeover, Strategic Resources for Defeating Municipalization. One of the steps you take is put together some countering information and just befuddle the public, befuddle decision makers, criticizing and pointing out shortcomings of the opponent's approach and positive information. So I just want to point out that this is standard operating procedure. A senior Semper executive has just been made the CEO of Edison Electric Institute. SDG&E has put in at least $2 million in the last few years to Edison Electric Institute. So they're following a very established game plan. Number two, SDG&E has put itself between a rock and a hard place. SDG&E, we have a multi-million-dollar public power feasibility study underway in the city. A lot of the numbers in that city are quite good and corroborated by the consultant. The issue we have with it is the framework. In our ballot initiative, what we chose to do is take those good numbers from that study and integrate them into our ballot initiative. However, we're accelerating the process that the city is looking at. They're looking at a model, transmission and distribution, that they say will take 12 years. 12 years will kill public enthusiasm for public power. We're using a model, distribution level, that will take 5 years, 5.5 years. So where does that put SDG&E? They've publicly been urging the community to wait for this study to continue forward with its 12-year timeline. However, we're using the numbers in that study in our ballot initiative. How much those assets cost, how much does it cost to separate, reintegrate, all these things. Those numbers are now under attack with this 7-page letter that SDG&E essentially wrote, but got a consultant to put their name on it. So let's take a look at what's in there. The consultant, first, there are 4 items. The 4 items include how much would the grid cost if we're going to buy it? How much is it going to cost to separate our wires from those of SDG&E so that we're a coherent grid? How much is it going to cost to start it up? And then what about city revenues? What about taxes? What about franchise fees? So four different elements, and we can get rid of one of them immediately, where they throw out $4 billion for foregone city revenue. In our ballot initiative, we say we will have payments in lieu of taxes to assure the city is maintained whole with its franchise fees and taxes. That's $4 billion gone. Next, the study looks at what are the assets worth? What is the grid worth? What are we going to buy? What are we going to pay for? What does the consultant say in this 7-page report? SDG&E just fed us the information. They gave us a number, and we put it in our 7-page report. So it's SDG&E's number. The consultant just took it and put it on a piece of paper. We have done 3 municipalization studies in San Diego in the last 6 years. The first one by a nonprofit, Municipalization Feasibility Study, 2017. Rigorous effort, came from a consultant that worked on the Boulder, a municipalization effort. Went through the meat and potatoes exercise of just estimating what are the assets worth. 2020, we did another study, this time with the same consultant we're using now during the franchise fight to estimate the asset value. Went through the whole procedure, came up with a value, happened to be $1.6 billion, fair market value. We have another study that's largely complete by the same consultant. They came up with essentially the same number, $1.7 billion. So we have study after study with well-documented information on what the fair market value of these assets are. And then we have this consultant, SDG&E's information with a consultant cover page where SDG&E just said, hey, we say it's 2.33 billion, and they put it in the report and that's it. There's no analysis, there's nothing. So this should be dismissed as simply SDG&E's disinformation to muddy the water, which is straight out of this playbook from Edison Electric Institute. How do you derail a municipalization campaign? So what is the next issue, and really the big issue that they put in this assessment, which is what they call separation and reintegration, meaning we've got National City, La Mesa, Poway, we've got these other communities that will continue to be served by SDG&E, and we have to serve only those customers in the city of San Diego. So we have to make some adjustments. We have to rearrange some of the wires to do that. And this consultant that we have, NewGen, that we have working now on a multi-million-dollar feasibility study in the city, has spent a considerable amount of effort to determine how to do that most effectively. They lay it out exactly what they're doing, and they give it a number, $254 million to do it. This study, not even study, this short assessment, 7 pages, in this case, the consultant says the separation of the transmission and distribution system is estimated by the company. Well, I was perplexed by that. What company? They don't define who the company is in the report until after rereading it a couple of times. Estimated by the company means estimated by SDG&E. SDG&E just fed this consultant another number and a couple of bullet items on what it covers, and goes on to say that we're making this estimate because the ballot initiative does not match up to any previous estimate of this cost. Not true. In order to minimize this kind of controversy, we took this information straight from the city's municipalization study. They define what the distribution grid is. We use the exact same definition in our ballot initiative, and for that reason, we're using the same value they determined for it, $254 million. SDG&E, and this is strictly SDG&E's information, the consultant takes no ownership of it. They create a whole different scenario out of whole cloth. New transmission substations, or separating transmission and distribution substations, adding more distribution substations. None of that applies. None of that is relevant. This again is just an exercise in befuddling our community by throwing something, anything against the wall, knowing that it will be reported. It's SDGE, and it happened last week. Had this big buzz, 11 billion, 13 billion, it's out there everywhere, and it will float out there for a while. But it is smoke. There is nothing behind it, and it isn't related to our ballot initiative. The final element that they bring up is startup. You have to start up a new, you got to set your business in motion, buildings, personnel, vehicles. This is a routine element of starting up a municipal utility from an investor-owned utility. The consultant in this municipalization report of the city estimated that cost at $300 million. And in this effort by SDGE with the consultant cover letter, they estimate the range at $300 million to $800 million. Well, where does the $300 million come from? They're citing the city's phase one municipalization report, $300 million to start it up. But then they band it with a city of Chicago number. Well, $800 million. City of Chicago, is Chicago bigger than San Diego? It's a lot bigger than San Diego, with a lot more demand. So instead of focusing on the study that is actually for San Diego, they band it with a study for a city that is irrelevant to our situation here. And so I just want to end this with a general comment. This 7-page analysis is embarrassing. I am a professional engineer. I wouldn't put my name on this document. In fact, it's embarrassing primarily because it's an SDGE write-up with a out-of-state consultant's cover letter on it. And it's easily picked apart, and it's very important for the community to know that this is a very ham-fisted effort to simply confuse us and take us off track from what is in fact an excellent opportunity to address what Craig brought up earlier, which is we're paying the highest or nearly the highest rates in the nation. We are having our best options like rooftop solar curtailed and undercut by this utility. And this is a wonderful opportunity for us to disengage from them and create a model not only for San Diego, but for the rest of the country.
Thank you, Bill. So obviously what Bill has explained to us is that SDG&E inflates their costs nearly as much as they inflate their rates. So we've said that before, but it's worth repeating. Bill will take questions, and Mark Hughes, another professional engineer, will take questions.
How many signatures do you have so far, Bill?
We're estimating currently we have about 15,000 signatures, but I must say we are on a roll. This good weather has really started to help in getting out there and getting signatures, so we remain optimistic.
Are you still estimating a 20% decrease in rates if this passes?
Yes, and that calculation is pretty straightforward. SDG&E's, the electric side of SDG&E's business, their gross profit is approximately 20% a year. And this will be a non-profit, not-for-profit municipal entity. Right off the top, we'll eliminate 20% of the costs and charges that SDG&E is currently collecting.
Where does that savings come from, primarily?
Well, the way the private monopoly utility business works is they get to make a guaranteed profit on all of their infrastructure. So transmission lines, they make, generally 10%, sometimes 12%, it depends. That's net. They make that's net. And so the most substantial part of it comes from that guaranteed profit on steel in the ground, essentially. But they also pay exorbitant executive salaries, which add a tremendous amount of burden on rates. In fact, one of our typical, in our slide presentations, we compare the Los Angeles Department in Water is the closest public utility to us of similar size. They're actually substantially greater in size than we would be a city of San Diego. Their CEO, general manager, makes just over $400,000 a year. The CEO of SDGE makes $11 million a year. In 2020, the last year, we have reportable values for that. So, 20, 25 times more in executive pay. And that's proportional throughout the executive suites of SDGE. So huge salaries, guaranteed profits, that's primarily where those savings come from.
Over $1 million a day in profits of San Diego. Just in, it's SDG&E profits over $1 million a day just in the city of San Diego.
Well, what do you make of this argument that, I think that they're kind of saying this is going to be a huge expense. I see on their website that they're saying this money could be put toward infrastructure instead of buying going to a municipal power. What do you make of that kind of argument?
And that's where I see SDGE relying on the general lack of information at the layperson level. This would be an enterprise fund. An enterprise fund, all of the investment it makes in purchasing these assets, for example, as a local electric utility, all of the income to pay for that comes from the ratepayers. Your monthly bill pays that off. There's no exposure to the city's general fund. There's no liability to the city in terms of financial liability. That is solely on this electric distribution utility. And the funds to pay for all this come from those monthly payments, bill payments.
And how do we know it works? Because in 46 cities across California, for 50 million people across the United States, it works. All public utilities are very different. Not all are perfect, some are far from perfect, but they all share one characteristic. They all charge lower rates than SDG&E. It's a proven model.
Can you, sorry for my ignorance, but can you compare the prices that the values that your study has versus their executive summary for just the infrastructure, for just
Sure.
What are the $2 amounts?
Bill, excuse me, it's not our study, excuse me, it's the city's study.
I understand.
Right, and thank you for underscoring that. We're using the city's municipalization study numbers, but on page 2 of this analysis, that or our rebuttal, there's a table that compares their numbers to our numbers.
Okay.
And just looking at the 3 categories that are being compared, they've got about $9 billion in costs. We've got $3 billion, more or less. And so they're 3 times higher. The cost I'm excluding is the $4 billion for franchise fees and taxes, which is a non-issue. This utility will make the city whole on that. So their implication that the city might lose that revenue is wrong.
Over what time frame is that $4 billion? That's not because
yeah, it's
I
over.
thought it was like 130 million a year for those.
Yeah, they
So
lay it.
you're laying that out over a certain time frame.
Yeah, they're laying
Okay.
this out
Okay.
over. I'm not sure they say exactly how much. They're estimating, approximately $100 million. So this must be over at least 30 or 40 years. 50-year discounted cash flow.
I mean, we basically end up with 2 studies claiming different things. And, no one's really diving into the weeds to try and analyze this. But one thing that people can understand is one of their claims is that you should wait for the phase 2 study to come out before you do a ballot initiative. Because that phase 2 study would be more specific and have more solid information without a lot of disclaimers in the footnotes saying these are just estimates and things can change. How do you respond to that?
First, I have to respond to you even equating what they have done to the city's municipalization effort that we're relying on. The city has spent millions of dollars to vet the the values in dollars that we are using. If Concentric Energy Advisors of Marlborough, Massachusetts was paid $15,000 for this, I would be amazed. All that happened in this case was SDG&E fed this consultant some numbers to put on a piece of paper, slap their name on it and turn it around. This is not a study. This is a interested party who's got money on the table throwing something against the wall to create some confusion. So having said that, about phase 1 and phase 2, the phase 1 study that the city did is largely complete, and I'm talking about us using the numbers in that phase 1 study. We did that in part just to avoid having a dispute about what the asset value is, what the separation value is. Let's just use the numbers that the city of San Diego is using and should be defending. And I haven't heard defense in the past week, but they should be defending their values. And then they say, well, let's wait for phase 2. Phase 1 is largely complete. What's going to happen in phase 2? The consultant is to gather insights from SDG&E, multiple meetings with SDG&E. What insights will be gathered? Unknown. I think the insight they'll get is don't do it. The other action to occur in phase 2, meet with IBEW 465 to gather insights. Who is IBEW 465? That is the House Union of SDG&E. And so basically phase 2 appears to be meeting with those that we know will oppose completely municipalization of San Diego. What else is in phase 2? Some additional fine tuning of the numbers, meaning we have a fair market value estimate for the distribution grid of 1.7 billion. They may, after the completion of phase 2, say it's 1.6 billion or 1.8 billion, a fine tuning of that number. And then finally compiling it and then finally choosing the governance. Are we going to have an elected board? Are we going to have an appointed board? We in the ballot initiative determined it will be an appointed board, period. We don't have to wait for that in phase 2. And so an important issue though is the study, and I've commended this study on the quality of the numbers, and those numbers are good, but this study only looks at a transmission and distribution utility, meaning the city's municipalization study. That extends the timeline to 12 years. Past studies for the city have said you should do a distribution only utility because you don't create the complications that extend the timeline. And it's a simpler, more efficient model. We anticipated when the city came out with this study, it would be an electric distribution system. They ignore that. They ignore prior studies. What we've done in our ballot initiative is simply go back to what the city had been studying already for a few years, which is distribution, to eliminate all this delay and accelerate the process so we can actually municipalize this decade. And so there's really nothing to wait for, David, in the phase 2 study. We're ready to go. And by the way, we are having sessions where we gather insights from SDG&E, but they tend to be somewhat as opponents. When we go before various groups in the city, they make their claims, we make ours. And so the idea that we would delay the municipalization study for almost 2 years to gather insights from entities that we know will ardently oppose us municipalizing is not productive time, in my view.
And I just wanted to add, there's a sense of urgency. There is an affordability crisis. 360,000 people are behind in their bills. There was some improvement in the last month, but in general, things are getting worse. People are behind $700. It's getting more and more difficult to cover bills. Electricity use is going to skyrocket as more and more people use air conditioning, as more and more people get electric cars. This is a crisis that will grow if left unaddressed. We think public power is a solution. It's a proven model. It can lower rates, restore local control, and provide an ally as opposed to an opponent in the climate fight.
And one other comment on that, well, go ahead and ask your question.
No, I'm done.
Okay, well, one other comment is, SDG has also put us in a somewhat ironic position of being able to advocate primarily to lower rates that we saturate this city with rooftop solar and batteries, because we are now spending far more than any other utility service territory in the state on transmission fees. If we become our own utility, we don't pay those transmission fees on whatever we build in this city. We can put one-off solar arrays on Walmarts and Costco's for less money than just importing the power over the transmission grid right now. And so this is not only about local control, it's about local control so we can implement an intelligent, fast, efficient way to provide power to the residents of San Diego and decarbonize at the same time.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much for coming,
Thank you.
and sincerely thank you for keeping local journalism alive. Very much appreciated.
Yeah, this is great that you came to our field office. It's great.
Can we do the interview? Is that possible?
Sí, señor.
Muy bien. So we'll frame that in the back.
Yeah.
Okay.